He spelled out all the consequences of being a disciple of Jesus. In the reading from Corinthians, he taught that joined to Christ, we are inevitably and unconditionally joined to one another, as the parts of the body form one person. Paul wrote from the very painful divisions so glaringly present in the church at Corinth. Paul was the father of this community. He loved them dearly, and it was being racked apart from within. 4 factions were at odds, 4 Christian cliques, each one with its own hero. Some were mesmerized by Apollos, an eloquent expert of the Hebrew Bible. Others pledged to Peter, the top dog in the church. The poor and the slaves clung to good old Paul, and a proud elite boasted of Christ. But intellectuals all, they claimed an inside track on him. And these divisions were bad enough, but there was so much more. Schism, civil lawsuits, food sacrifice to idols, disorderly conduct and abuses in celebrating the Lord's Supper. Some even denied the resurrection of the body. This is the context, the setting for the 12th chapter of the letter to the Corinthians. Paul was proposing a theology of church, what can be, what should be, even of imperfect, sinful people. What is that? Unity. That's the goal of the church in every age. Unity. Certainly not denying diversity. There will always be differences in the church, in the way things are understood, in the way the message finds a home in every culture, expressed in so many different ways. The ways in which people worship. So glaringly different from the church here in Schaumburg, from the church, say, in Africa. Yes, we do not want uniformity, but unity. The Christian community, when it lives out its role, is like a very beautiful mosaic, composed of many different shapes, many different sizes, many different colors, one and many in its interlocking members. And each has its own contribution to make in the mission of Christ, so the mission of the church. And what precisely is the mission? Jesus came to Nazareth, where he had been raised. And entering the synagogue, as he was wont to do, he stood up to do the reading. The Spirit of the Lord is upon me, and therefore he has anointed me. He has sent me to bring good news to the poor, to proclaim liberty to captives and recovery of sight to the blind. The missions of Jesus proclaimed and lived out by him in the power of the Spirit. Certainly God is always at the center of Jesus' life. God to be praised and to be thanked, to be implored for help. It was God through whom Jesus washed and filtered his every understanding, conviction, and action. But the will of God was and is to free those who are oppressed in any way. That's the mission of the church. It's not just to save our souls, it's to bring the fullness of Christ to the community to which we belong. So does Jesus call down the rain of God, and so are we to do. You know, oppression comes in many ways. There's poverty, racism, exclusion, whether it's at school or in the workplace. The willingness to accept diversity is one sign of true humility of heart. When we are able to embrace those who think differently from us, who look differently from us, who have a history that is uniquely their own, and when we are able to listen, maybe not agree, but to listen, to try to understand, and always to accept them as people, well, then we have a sign that we've heard the message. Unity in diversity. The Spirit of God whispers to all, but to each one of us in a different way. Pope Francis accepts this as he respects the sincere convictions of all he encounters. He was a standard to the conservative bishops of Argentina when he went to a huge gathering of evangelical Protestants and knelt before them and asked them to bless him. Why? He accepted their conscience. Their journey towards God was different than his, but he accepted them, and he blessed them as he allowed them to bless him. The reign of God is at hand, it's now, but its fullness remains future. The Christian message is still in its infancy. I'm amused by those people who think that the end of time is now. All the Scripture tells us that the coming of the reign of God is a time when there will be peace, when there will be unity, when brothers and sisters will accept one another. That's a long way off, but God has promised, and God will do it. And meanwhile, if we take Jesus seriously, we will be truly upset by the injustice that so many people face daily. And we will ache to make a difference, to push the boundaries of our concern for those weighed down by the pain of life, and to bring the good news of Christ's compassion and concern. The annual Catholic Appeal of the Archdiocese of Chicago is taking place in these coming weeks. The funds collected from the Catholic people of the diocese will be for all who are in need, for the homeless, for school children with their many needs, for the seminaries, for Catholic charities, for the Catholic relief services, one of the jewels in the life of the Catholic Church. Wherever there is a crisis, Catholic relief services are present to minister to all the needs of people, irrespective of any division amongst them. At the beginning of the homily, I stressed that Paul was a realist, that there are consequences for being a disciple of Jesus, responding with compassion and generosity for those weighed down by the pain of life. Please be generous in pledging to the annual Catholic Appeal.